Okay, welcome everybody to today's Wavelink webinar. My name is Rob DiStefano. I'm the Product Marketing Manager for Wavelink. Along with me for today's webinar is our Senior Systems Architect for our channel business, Mr. Bailey Ith. Bailey, can you give me a sound check here?
Yep, looks good.
Okay, well welcome everybody. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on where you're listening in from. Today, I want to talk a bit about what the traditional mindset in voice enablement has been, and how that's changed over the last couple of years, and what Wavelink is offering to be able to improve the experience you may have had with voice in the past. Take you through our agenda here. So the first thing we'll talk through is the traditional model for voice applications and how that can be improved on through redefining voice enablement with Wavelink Speakeasy. Talk about where voice may make sense in your business, what applications, what types of areas where you might see the best returns on investment. Bailey, who I introduced a moment ago, will be doing a product demonstration, so you'll be able to see a bit of how the product works. And then we'll take some Q&A at the end. So for folks who have questions throughout the presentation, by all means, put them into the chat window, and we'll review those at the end. Probably take about 40 to 45 minutes of your time now. So I appreciate you joining us for it. So let's dive in. So a lot of times when I speak with customers about voice, there's immediately a little bit of hesitation on their part. You know, a lot of times I'll hear, well, we looked at voice years ago, and yeah, it was really kind of hard to determine where the ROI was. It was really hard to find a place where their operational workflow would really lend itself to it. And the stories that they had heard and some of the pains they had experienced, and some of the stories I heard from them, were understandably reasons why they may have been a little gun shy to revisit voice. So first I wanted to walk you through some of the challenges with the traditional model, and some of these things may resonate with what you've heard from traditional voice vendors. So this is the old model. This is the traditional voice implementation model. This is not a chart that I made. This is frankly from a traditional voice vendor's own documentation describing how their implementation works, okay? It's a pretty sophisticated diagram, okay? Sure, it does allow for voice to be deployed in your enterprise, but there's an awful lot of pictures here, okay? And there's an awful lot of arrows and an awful lot of flow that needs to happen in order to make a voice implementation work. The bottom line here is, when you look at that level of sophistication, it can often be way too complicated for being able to add a technology to make a multimodal data entry platform work. That's really what you're doing with voice, right? You've likely got mobile devices, barcode scanning enabled, maybe doing some RFID, maybe not, maybe doing some key entry as part of the task workflow. You're looking to add voice to add an additional option for data capture and also for voice direction, okay? It should be as simple as it sounds, okay? So this is the challenge with the existing model, is it's an awfully big scope of work for adding something that should be easy, right? Now, I blog a lot about voice, and one of the things that really I find as a challenge in talking with voice users and folks and enterprises that are looking to deploy voice, and I talk about this a lot in my blogs, is what are the big challenges that they run into? Okay, and one area that keeps coming up thematically is that there's a lot of costs involved. All right, it's not just I'm buying voice. I'm buying a whole lot of things that come with voice that balloon the cost and balloon the complexity of deploying voice. So this slide, I'm going to take you through, and for those of you who are football fans, I call this the John Madden slide, and you'll see why as it builds. There's multiple areas where there's cost involved with a traditional voice model. These are costs that you can do without. The first one you see here on the screen where the arrow is pointing is to the proprietary voice hardware that some legacy voice applications require. What I'm referring to there is the specific computer, in addition to your mobile barcode scanner, for example, that your workers need to wear on their belt or on their shoulder, that is purely there for voice processing. Okay, that may have been needed years ago. It's not so necessary anymore, and it's a significant cost. Why? Because it's physical hardware. So that's one cost that used to be necessary, no longer is. The second is getting into things like middleware. Okay, again, the old model required middleware to be able to handle that voice information that's being sent from your mobile workforce back to your host system. All right, there had to be that middle layer, those APIs, right, or software interfaces as they're often referred to, that sit between the mobile user and your host system. Okay, boom, another cost. Okay, boom, yet a third cost, right? The modifications that the traditional voice application require to your host system. Your voice vendor wants to touch your host system. That's something that ought to be a no-no, right? You've spent an awful lot of money optimizing that host system for your workflows. The last thing you want is more vendors touching it, okay? And the fourth cost, and this is the one that really fires me up because this is the way the old model has been, is you've got your host system in place, but as your business evolved, you want to make changes to your host system. Well, your voice vendor wants to charge you again. Why? Because when you go in and you want to make a modification to your host system, that voice vendor wants you to pay them to come back and retest their software to make sure that it continues to work with your modifications. You own your system. Why do you want other vendors to have the right to touch it and to charge you for that? Okay? So here are, as you can see here on the slide, there's 4 costs there that I can tell you they're part of the old model. They're not the way things have to be. And to some degree, right, it's really not, it's not modern, right? I mean, if you think about the way traditional voice applications have been provided, the model and the design for it goes back to the late 80s, right? If I'm not mistaken, it was 1987 when the first of what's known today in the market as traditional voice picking solutions were brought to market, okay? But when we think about how other things have evolved since 1987, okay? Windows 2.0 came out in 1987. The Perl programming language came out in 1987, okay? Your voice-enabled application should not be running on a model that was built in 1987. Okay? Yes, it does work, but boy, is it exactly what we hear from folks all around the world. It's hard for me to justify it. Sure, I'm trying to justify 1987 technology in 2015. Makes sense. How do we get away from that? Well, there's a reason why Wavelength calls the product Speakeasy. Okay? This is our deployment model. Compare that to the chart I've been showing on the last several slides, okay? And you can see the complexity is gone. What do I really have going on here on this slide? On the left-hand side of the arrows, you see your host system and your network. We don't touch that, okay? Voice is handled through Speakeasy. Your voice enabling the mobile client that's on your mobile device. As far as your host system is concerned, it doesn't even know nor care that the data it's receiving was captured via voice. It matters that it's coming through in the same flow as text entry or barcode scanning. It's coming through as data appropriate for those fields in the application. So you go from having a model of, great complexity and broad scope, and you get full functioning voice here, where everything for enabling voice is sitting on the mobile device. This is what Wavelength talks about when we talk about redefining voice enablement. Voice, like I said, has been around and does work for the last almost 30 years, right? But in order to stay on top of the change in your business and technology capabilities, there's no reason to be paying for 1987 technology, okay? When we talk about redefining voice, we talk about making it easy. Why? Well, I'll walk you through. We talk about it in the sense of you can enable voice with the technology you already have, okay? If you have deployed mobile devices from any of the leading mobile device manufacturers, and I'm talking about the folks who make, the organizations that provide barcode scanning mobile computers, whether that's Zebra, right, DataLogic, or any of the others, right? If you've purchased those devices in the last 7 or 8 years, they've got the architecture. They've got the power in the device in terms of processing power and memory to be able to add voice, okay? And in many of those use cases throughout your warehouse operations or your manufacturing floor, you're likely using a mobility client such as terminal emulation. With Speakeasy, you can very easily, in 30 days, add voice to that client. Okay? And again, we don't touch your host application, but you've got your voice, you've got your WMS or your ERP system, whatever your host interface system is, right? Whatever system you've got on the back end that your mobile workforce is attaching to, that you want to add the voice to, you don't have to touch that. You've already got that. So you don't have to make those changes. This is a lot of reasons why not only does it reduce the complexity, but it reduces the cost. Okay? Because when you buy voice, you're only buying voice. You're not having to pay for all those additional proprietary hardware and middleware and things like that I spoke of earlier. Okay? It's a big change in the market. So the other side of redefining voice enablement is how we improve the model. You saw in our very simplified voice enablement model that all of the voice enablement is done on the mobile device. Okay, so 100% voice handled on the mobile device. All the voice processing is done right inside that mobile computer. It doesn't require you to use any proprietary hardware, so you just need the horsepower that's running in that device. And again, you're talking about devices that have, if you've purchased in the last 6 to 8 years or sooner, you've got the horsepower to do that. And the speed of deployment is a big change versus what you might have seen in voice in years past. If you talk to a voice vendor 5 years ago, 3 years ago, or just talk to a different vendor than us, right? You may have heard estimates on what your deployment timeline is. We deploy voice in 30 days or less for many customers. Why? Because we're just adding voice to what they've already got. Okay? You're adding another mode of data entry to a multimodal mobile application that's already being used, and you're adding voice where it makes sense. If there's certain screens where barcode scanning is still going to be faster, there's maybe certain screens where voice is going to be able to allow that worker to be heads up, eyes forward, more safe, more speed. I've had several customers explain their reasoning for voice was, I needed to stop my worker from having to look down at their mobile device screen for 2 seconds and stop their feet from moving. It was a great story I heard once. He said, one of my customers said, I watched my workers, and every time they looked down at their device, they stopped moving for 2 seconds. Makes sense, right? You look where you're going, especially when you're in a warehouse environment. He said, well, he had to stop 6 times in each workflow. He does 500 picks a day. He's stopping 12 seconds 500 times each day. I have how many workers in my environment doing that same thing? Okay? When we're talking about productivity gains that come with this, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about being able to let those workers work faster by grabbing a couple of seconds here and there that allow them to be safer and faster in getting through their tasks. Okay? And in changing the model, right, and redefining voice enablement, we eliminate a lot of those costs that I spoke of earlier on. We do away with middleware, system interfaces, API, whatever you want to call them, or whatever you may have heard them called by other vendors. Okay? We don't touch your host system, okay? And we don't require you to have any proprietary voice processing hardware. Again, if you've got mobile devices that are of a fairly recent generation, you're able to run Speakeasy on those devices. Okay? So we eliminate those costs for you. And think about that when you look at the scope of work that you may have received from a voice vendor in the past. We've in many cases been able to show customers how they could deploy voice for a third the cost of what they've seen from others. These are some of the ways you do it. Right? It's a big change versus technology that was introduced back in the late 1980s. And when we talk about voice, and you heard me say it a little earlier, you add voice where voice makes sense. Right? Voice in most use cases ought not be the only way you do data capture. Okay? There's a reason for the mass adoption of barcode scanning and how it's even made its way into the consumer world in recent years, because it is very fast and very accurate. Now, when you add voice, you're taking advantages of the places in the workflow where voice can let your workers get even more done. So you want it to be complementary. And you add it when you determine your ROI. You say, I can add voice in these couple of steps in the workflow, maybe one of those times where it's about keeping the workers from stopping so many seconds, so many times throughout their task, okay, and multiplying that out. There's a lot of cases where that's going to be where the rubber meets the road. I need to show that empirical evidence of how I'm going to make my workers faster. But, you know, we've spoken with companies around the world where they recognize their ROI differently, and it's fascinating, right? In some cases, it's all about the worker safety aspect of it. It's like, hey, you know, our shop requires us to increase our safety standards for our workers. This is one of the ways we want to be able to do it, right? We've got guys driving forklifts, right, all around, and we don't want people to be not watching where they're going because they're busy looking at a device screen. We want that, that voice direction to be able to have our workers be able to be heads up, eyes forward, watching where they're going, okay? For some, it's the speed of deployment. It's, hey, we need to realize this cost now. I can't wait 6 months or more for a traditional voice implementation to happen. I want to be able to start recognizing that before my busy season this year, not waiting to realize it until next year, right? In other places, it's about training. And this is another important point that isn't in the model itself, but it's in the design of Speakeasy. Traditional voice systems, you need to train the voice processing unit to recognize a particular user, how they pronounce things, their own unique accent, right? With Speakeasy, you don't need to train the system. All you need to do is train the worker on how to use it. And it's very easy, right? So now, instead of having workers have to pick up a unique device dedicated just for them, okay, now, instead of that worker having to spend hours or days sitting there speaking all the different possible entries into their workflow so that the system can learn how they speak, now with Speakeasy, they can pick up any voice-enabled device and go. The system doesn't need to learn. There's no voice profiles necessary with Speakeasy. So it saves you prep time. Again, this is another instrument in how Speakeasy allows you to get your voice enablement solution deployed faster. Right? And of course, as I mentioned at the beginning of this slide, right, for those that are that are really going to be driven by the numbers, okay? Work those numbers out. We have case studies up on our website that you'll be able to read after this webinar, where we have customers who have, in their own words, described 50% efficiency gains by adding Wavelength Speakeasy to their operations. All right, folks who do thousands of picks per day, and what that's done, and what Speakeasy has done in order to accelerate their worker productivity. And when you realize the return on investment on a much more economical solution that is still fully featured, you start to be able to open up the doors within your organization saying, gee, voice is more than just for picking. Where else in my warehouse or my plant for my facilities is voice going to make sense? Because now I can more easily justify that ROI into a broader set of use cases. Right? Now voice makes sense for some of the places where it was cost prohibitive before. And that was the biggest objection we heard from so many businesses about voice over the years was, I looked at voice, it's too expensive. I could never justify the ROI, or maybe I was able to justify it in picking only and that was it. Well, that's okay. Now you can look at this ROI with Speakeasy and say, I can justify the ROI in some of these other cycle counting and putaways and returns use cases that I couldn't before. Okay? This data comes from VDC Research. They did some surveys last year, and these are some of the other use cases that that they heard in their survey. Respondents indicating that that the use case supported voice. Okay, but that's a big piece of the challenge with voice in the past has been, I can only run it for picking because it was the only place I could justify it. Take a look at your business, take a look at Speakeasy, and take a look at where that improved ROI can benefit your business in other places. Okay. One other thing I will add here when we talk about voice being historically picking generated. If you've got a traditional voice system deployed for picking, and you feel I'm heavily invested in this, I can't move away from it for my picking application, so I'm going to stick with that. You have to do what's right for your business. But I would encourage you that you should know that you can add Wavelength Speakeasy to other use cases around that. We have customers who had previously purchased voice where they could justify it in picking but nowhere else, and now they run Speakeasy in applications elsewhere throughout their business because they're not prepared to walk away from the investment they had made in that legacy system. But they realize they could benefit by adding voice in other places now because they couldn't justify it in the past, but they can with Speakeasy. So keep that in mind for your operations as well. At this point, I'd like to turn the presentation over to Mr. Bailey Ith, who can walk us through a product demonstration. Bailey, are you ready?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I'm going to give you presenter privileges and share your screen, and you're on your way.
Great. Thank you, Rob.
Okay.
All right. Hope everybody's doing well. I'm just now sharing my screen. Okay, so you should be able to see my screen now. So what I have running here is a real simple picking demo that demonstrates how Speakeasy works with existing WMS applications. So I'm going to take you through the demo, both through the non-voice version and the voice version, and then also show you the magic behind Speakeasy and how it's implemented, basically. Okay. So to start off with, what you need is our Telnet client. So Speakeasy runs on top of our Wavelength client, and most of you guys may not be aware that you probably already use Wavelength on your current devices. We preload and pre-license on a whole bunch of devices from different manufacturers like Datalogix or Zebra, and we also support devices that don't pre-license or preload our software as well, like from Honeywell. So whether you're running any of those manufacturers' devices, just check with us, and we'll be able to tell you if that device supports audio or not, and if Speakeasy will run on top of it. Okay. So what I have on my screen here is our Wavelength Telnet client running on a Windows PC. So whether it's Windows XP 7 or Windows 8, you can also run Speakeasy on top of that. So for those vehicle-mounted terminals that are running the big OSs, Speakeasy will work on those as well. Okay. The telnet I have set up here is just VT220 emulation. I'm connecting up to my server. So let's go ahead and do that here. So I'm going to connect up. And I have two profiles set up. I have one for voice and one for non-voice. So this is also a good way to have multiple languages. So if you have Spanish speakers and English speakers and you want them to be able to pick between one profile and the other, you can do that by setting up your different host profiles. Okay. And then so when the user goes to connect up to the host, they can pick between the two different versions. In this case, I have one for voice and one for non-voice. I'm going to go ahead and connect up here. So I'm just at a typical login screen. I'm just going to log in. Okay. This is my main menu, and the process we're going to go through today is going to be the pick process, since that's where you get your most bang for your buck. Okay, and so now it's asking me to scan a task number. So I do have a scanner plugged into my laptop here, so I'm going to go ahead and scan a task number. Okay. So after scanning the task number, it's now telling me that I need to go to this location, which is B16-G06-019, and I need to pick 27 cases of this particular item. But before I do my pick, it's asking me to scan a location to verify that I am indeed at the right area for this product. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and scan the location. Okay. Now I can pick my quantity, which is 27. So I'm just going to go ahead and do 27 and enter. And then now it's asking me to scan a printer. And so I'm just going to go ahead and type it in. And then it's asking me to stage it. All right. So now it loops back to the login screen. So again, that's a very simple pick process, but as you can imagine, a user going through this process out in the warehouse, they're going to be constantly looking down at their device to determine where they need to go, right? So there's the aisle, there's the bay, and there's the level. So they're going to be walking to that location and then scanning that location and then doing their pick. Again, they're using a lot of keyboard entry for the quantity, and they're constantly looking down at the device. Okay. So now, with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and run our demo with Speakeasy, or voice added. So again, the application does not change at all. So just to reiterate what Rob was saying, the host stays exactly the same. All the modifications and changes were done on the client side. Okay, so we've also added some screen reformatting. So if there are screens that you want to highlight a certain field or modify the way it looks to the end user, you can do that as well using our screen reformatter tool. However, if you just want to add voice and not change any of your screens at all, then you just leave it alone and don't use the screen reformatter to modify it. Okay, so let's go ahead and go through this.
Welcome to the Speakeasy picking demo. Say begin to start.
Begin.
Main menu. Say outbound pick.
Outbound pick.
Scan task number.
Okay. And since this is multimodal, I'm still able to scan or use my keyboard. So we're not 100% voice. So in those instances where voice recognition is tough or hard, and it's just not picking up the user's voice, you're not down. You're not left, with the user unable to perform its specific task. You can still scan when needed. So I'm going to go ahead and scan here.
Go to Bravo 16-Delta 06-019.
Okay, so with Speakeasy, we can read anything off the screen that you want read to the end user. So in this case, we have the location read to the user. So now the user doesn't have to look at their device. They can just hear and be voice directed to where they need to go. And at any time, if they forget, where they're going, they can just say again, or if they want to just hear the aisle, they can just say aisle. If they just want to hear the bay, then they can just say bay, and etc. So I'm going to go ahead and do that here. Say again.
Go to Bravo 16-Delta 06-019.
Aisle,
Bravo 16,
bay,
Delta 06,
level.
019.
Okay, so I was able to read off in any part of that location back to the user. Okay, and also for training purposes, like Rob also mentioned, at any one of the particular screens, we've added commands. If the user was to get stuck at a particular screen, they can just say, help me, and the system would then direct the user on what to do on that particular screen. So I'll go ahead and say that here. Help me.
Scan the location or say, aisle, bay, or level.
Okay. So as you can imagine, if you have a lot of seasonal workers, getting them up to speed on the system is much quicker, and this has been demonstrated at multiple customer sites. They're now able to hand the device to a user who is not familiar with the system and have them run through specific transactions a lot faster than training them individually. Now they can use voice, and at any time they get stuck, they don't have to go call a supervisor to get help on that particular screen. They can just say, help me, and the voice engine will tell the user what to do on those screens. Okay. Voice menu.
Voice menu.
Okay. Another feature we've added here is the ability to control the audio on the device itself and the cadence of the voice engine. So at any time on any screen, the user can say voice menu and be able to control the volume by saying volume up or volume down to increase the audio on their headset, or to say speak faster or speak slower to increase or decrease the cadence of the speaker engine itself. Okay? And we'll find that once the users get very good at this picking process or using voice, that they'll just basically have the voice engine speak at its fastest rate because they already know how to use the system, and they just basically fly through their picking process using voice. Okay? Volume down.
Volume decreased.
Volume up.
Volume increased.
Speak slower.
Cadence decreased.
Exit menu.
Go to Bravo 16-Delta 06-019.
Okay, so that's a little bit too slow for me, so I'm going to go ahead and increase that volume back up. Voice menu.
Voice menu.
Speak faster.
Cadence increased.
Exit menu.
Go to Bravo 16-Delta 06-019. Confirm pick quantity.
5, ready?
Do you want to override the pick quantity? Say yes or no.
Okay, so I purposely set a quantity that was lower than the quantity that I needed to pick. And in most systems, that will trigger some type of action where the user is able to do a short pick, right? And so for any menus where you get a yes or no type question, voice makes it that much faster. So now the user doesn't have to hit Y or N followed by enter on the keyboard itself. They just simply say yes or no. No.
Confirm pick quantity.
27, ready?
Select printer location. Say printer 1.
Printer 1.
Demo complete. Thank you for trying Speakeasy.
All right. So that was a lot smoother, and you can see how voice can enhance the performance of the user. They're now hands-free. They can pick up their products and put it on the carts without having to set down the RF terminal in doing so. Okay. All right. So now let's go ahead and take a look at how this all works. Every time I show this, we get a lot of people saying, "Oh, that can't be right. That's just too easy." But really, it is that easy, and that's one of the things I want to get out today is that Speakeasy is very easy to implement and is non-invasive in your existing environment. Right? We don't add any middleware like Rob was saying, and we don't add any additional network traffic at all. The traffic between the mobile device and the back-end system, your host, whether it's Oracle, HighJump, SAP, any one of those WMSs, we don't add any additional traffic at all, and it doesn't care what the WMS is either. Okay, so the way that we do it is we start off with a screen capture. Okay, so you will take a screen capture of the areas where you want to add voice. Okay, once you've captured that, then what you do is you go in and import that into our screen reformatter, where you would then start to add voice. Okay, so I'm going to show you that. All right, so this is our development environment, right? So this is our screen reformatter utility, and this is where you would go in and add the voice. Okay, so this is our login screen, and at this login screen here, we actually called out a script to present a bitmap to the user. So that's where you get that nice bitmap at the very beginning instead of the traditional login screen. Okay. Here's our main menu. I'll go ahead and make this a little bit bigger here. Okay, so down at the bottom here is our original green screen with our main menu options. Outbound pick is option 3. Okay, and we reformatted it so that way it presents the user with this main menu screen here. Okay, and again, this is not necessary. If you're happy with your existing layout of your text-based system, then you just leave it the way it is. But if you wanted to change it and highlight certain areas, you can. So in this case here, we highlighted outbound pick, right? But if you wanted to maybe direct the user to outbound pick only and not show them the other menu items, it's very easy to do. You can just delete these items here, right? So now the user only gets one option. When they pick up this device and connect up, they're only going to be able to see the outbound pick process. Okay, so now you're directing them just to that. They don't have the option to see the other items there. Okay. So now what we need is a grammar file. So the system is grammar file based, which means that we call a grammar file which contains the valid commands on a particular screen. So on this screen here called main menu, I want the user to be able to say outbound pick. Okay, so what we do is we define that in our grammar file. Okay, so if I go to my grammar file manager and go to main menu, and we have a whole library of grammar files already. So a lot of things that you're doing, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? You can use our existing libraries. For example, if you wanted to, have the user speak out up to 4 characters, then you can just pick one of our grammar files that's already in our library and use that. You don't have to recreate it. Okay. So the one I'm looking for here is main menu commands. So if I edit this here, you can see that in our grammar file, I have outbound pick here. And so to also cover for different pronunciations, right? Somebody might pick up the device and say outbound peak or outbound pick, right? So there's different ways they may say that. So we try to cover for that. But the response or the result that you send back to our application is outbound pick. Okay, so regardless of how they say it, we're always returning outbound pick back to the system. Okay, so now if we go back to our screen reformatter, we can add speech to text and text to speech. Okay, so my valid command is going to be outbound pick. So first I got to decide on this screen here, what do I want read to the user? Do I want to say anything or the system to say anything to the end user? So in this case here it says the text to speech is main menu, say outbound pick. And you can start with just text to speech. Maybe you just want to go through your system and add text to speech first, right? So they're not dependent on each other. So you can use text to speech or speech to text. You don't have to use both. Okay. So here in this case, the text to speech says main menu, say outbound pick. Okay. If I wanted to change that or add something else, I can do that. I can just right click here and do add text to speech. I'm going to add hello. Okay. So by adding hello, it adds it to the bottom of the supporting action. So now I'm going to make that the first action. So now when it hits the system, it's going to say hello, then main menu, say outbound pick. Okay, that's the text to speech. So now here's the speech to text. So if I edit this, you can see that it's calling that grammar file that was created, right, for that valid command. So main menu commands. And I also have a grammar file called lib global commands. So the global commands are the commands that are valid across all my screens. So things like help me, say again, voice menu, those are all commands that are global, right? The commands that are local for just this screen is coming from main menu commands. And so if I go to local actions here, you can see that I have outbound pick as the result from the voice engine. So if I edit this, you can see that if I hear outbound pick on this particular screen, all I'm doing is basically sending the text 3 followed by carriage return. And if you recall that main menu, outbound pick is option 3. So really what we're doing is now using voice as a wedge, as a data wedge basically. We're saying outbound pick, capturing that, and sending 3 followed by carriage return. So then now we're able to use voice to navigate past that screen. Okay, that's a very simple action, right? That we perform, but we can get much more complicated. We can run a script if we wanted to, or just a simple key press. Maybe you just want the user to be able to say back and perform an F3. Then you can just do perform key press F3. Okay, but a lot of our users find that they end up running a script where they can perform certain actions that are more complex. Like, for example, reading a specific row and column off the screen. You can run a script to do that. And that's how we were able to do aisle, bay, and level for the location. We captured that, and then we read off only the specific portion of that screen to the user via a script. Okay. Hopefully all this is making sense. All right. So again, that basic process was, 1, do a screen capture of the screens that you want to add voice to. 2, create the grammar files, which is the list of valid commands on your particular screen. And then 3, use our screen reformatter to then call that grammar file and to add text-to-speech and speech-to-text. Okay, so with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it back over to Rob and have questions and answers for the last 15 minutes here. Thank you for your time, guys.
Great. Great, thanks, Bailey. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let me just take back control of the screen. Okay. And can you see my screen okay?
I don't see your screen.
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you, though.
All right. All right, stand by for 1 second. Let me reshare that guy. And hopefully that should give us what we needed to do.
That looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, so as Bailey mentioned, that pretty much wraps up our presentation itself for today. So what I'd like to do is just kind of wrap things up. So I mentioned before that we can get started pretty quickly, and as Bailey showed you in the demo, how easy it really is to add voice to your mobile client with Speakeasy. Right? Take a look. If you haven't looked at voice in a while, you're going to see a lot of change, much of which, in terms of the model, I've tried to cover here. But in Bailey's demonstration, I think even shows you more than I could possibly have spoken about. Right? It's should be this easy to add voice, right? Because, like I said, you're adding an additional data capture technology to your mobile deployment. For more information, I've got a URL here on the screen which will give you some access to case studies. You can hear from existing Wavelength Speakeasy customers talking about everything from their implementation experience to their individual calculations of return on investment. So you can hear straight from our actual customers on the benefits they've realized by working with us. Really appreciate everybody spending the time with us today. What I'd like to do now is open up with some Q&A. Before I do, I'd just also like to point out here on this screen, if your question doesn't get answered in the Q&A here, or if you have additional questions that come up after this webinar, by all means, feel free to reach out to us. You can jot down our email addresses from here on the screen, and we'll make sure that we get the answers back to you, as well as you've got our Twitter links if you'd like to follow us in social media and get the latest and greatest on what we're seeing in the mobile productivity space. So with that, I'd like to open things up to Q&A, and let's take a second to see what we've got here. All right, let's see. Give a moment for some questions to come in. Okay, question I've got here first is, I talked a bit about this before, but question come in: how is ROI computed? And again, it really can be computed a number of ways. I've talked to customers who do it the traditional way you'd expect, in the sense of show me dollars and cents in terms of how much more my workers can get done, and that's where people are able to realize real tangible dollar value returns on deployments of Speakeasy. And I mentioned before, we've had customers who talk about seeing 50% efficiency gains and more by adding Speakeasy when you're calculating it out that way. But we've also had folks who calculate it based on improved safety, employee morale, things like that. We have customers whose model is not about being able to necessarily do more picks in an individual shift, but actually to motivate the employees and keep them and make them happier, to actually have a set task list. And the faster they get that task list done, they go home. So being able to, for example, give a warehouse worker the technology to be able to get 8 hours worth of work done in 6.5 hours or 6 hours and be able to be paid for the full 8, that's how they calculate their return on investment. The safety piece is a big one as well. There's a variety of ways in which you might decide are the pole stars of your voice enablement approach. But it really depends on your business. But what I can tell you is, with Speakeasy, you are going to see those returns. And we're happy to have our team work with you to help you achieve the objectives you're looking to get out of adding voice to your mobile workforce. Bailey, I got a question for you here, if you could. We're using a Velocity CE application. Can I add Speakeasy to that?
Yes, absolutely. So our Speakeasy solution does work over Telnet and our web-based products. So both the industrial browser and the Velocity client do support Speakeasy.
Great.
All you would need is our Speakeasy voice engine package, so both the text-to-speech and the speech-to-text running with that client. The way that it works, though, is a little bit different as far as Telnet. With Telnet, what we're doing is we're capturing the screens and then adding the voice. With web, we have our JavaScript APIs for Speakeasy engine that allows you to do web inserts into your existing application. So the technology is the same. There's still no modifications needed on your host application. We do all the voice all on the device side, and we do the calls all on the device side. So we don't have to touch your back end.
Great, thank you. Another one for you came in here. Can we talk a bit about the international foreign language support, if you will? We demoed in English, obviously, but can we talk a bit about our support for Spanish, other languages? Question references Spanish and Portuguese specifically, but maybe we can talk about what we do offer.
Yeah, we support both of those languages. We have 29 languages that we support. We use the Nuance voice engine, which is a very popular voice engine out in the market. Nuance is the provider of voice engines for automobiles and GPSs and things like that. So it's a very robust voice engine, and we typically support the languages that they support. Currently is at around 29. If there's a language that you're looking to support, just let us know, and we'll let you know if it's supported or not. Okay,
great. Let's see what else we have here. Can we talk a bit about training? If a customer is getting started with Speakeasy, what type of training is available for them? I know we offer training services, but maybe you're a little closer to it than I am.
Yeah. No, we do offer training services around Speakeasy. We do have customers who take on the development for Speakeasy. It is, like I showed you, pretty easy to do. You just need to go through the training course to understand, all the components and our scripting tool as well. But yeah, we offer training. You can contact your local sales rep for pricing on that.
Excellent. The next question that came in, question is, our warehouse is an automated environment. How does the voice system handle background noise? Do mics have background noise cancellation? So I'm going to answer. I'm going to provide some info on here, and Bailey, if you want to expand on this, please by all means. So what I'd like to clarify first is that this is Speakeasy software is a software piece. So when you're talking about the capabilities of specific microphone, some of that's going to be dependent on the individual microphone you use in conjunction with the Speakeasy voice system. But as far as background noise, from my experience, and I've demoed this in live warehouses, but I've also demoed this in noisy trade show environments. And for those who may have seen our demonstrations in those environments, you know that some shows that we demonstrate are far quiet, that the system can certainly handle that background noise. But maybe you've got a little bit of the technical background for how that works.
Sure. So we always recommend a good noise canceling headset. It is a key component of voice. When you're choosing a device or using an existing device, the device manufacturers have headsets for voice already. So we always recommend using the device manufacturer's headset for when you're using voice with the devices. We also offer third-party headsets or suggest third-party headsets as well, whether they're wired or Bluetooth.
Perfect. One last question here. I know there's a couple more here that we'll follow up with separately, but we're getting close to the top of the hour. Can you use SSH rather than Telnet?
Yes, we can. Again, Speakeasy adds no additional network traffic. The connection between your mobile device across your network back to your back-end system stays exactly the same. So if you're using SSH currently with Telnet, you'll continue to use SSH, and voice is just added on the device side. There's no voice traffic added to your network itself.
Okay, great. All right, folks. Well, I'd like to just take the last 30 seconds here to thank you all for spending the last hour with us. Hope the information in here is helpful, and hope to have the opportunity to hear from more of you in the days and weeks ahead. Again, our contact information here on the screen. By all means, if you have additional questions, do shoot us an email, and we'll make sure that we get back to you, myself and Bailey, and we'll pull the appropriate folks in across the business if need be to get a response back to you. For those whose questions were not able to be addressed here in the time we had, we will make sure to follow up with you individually on those. Thanks again for attending, and we'll see you soon on another Wavelength webinar. Thanks so much.